Meeting to order. We're starting with a work session, a presentation by Bar Engineering. Mr. Schrader, you want to lead that off?
Mr. Mayor, Council, Bar is prepared to do a presentation on the continued maintenance plan for the city of Mitchell for our lake project. So with that, I'll turn it over to Eric Lund with Bar.
Hey, hi, good afternoon. Hear me okay?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No, it's okay. Yeah, so I'm going to primarily turn it over to Greg Wilson, one of our water quality experts. We were asked to give this presentation just to give a little bit more context on our experience and our experience with and experience sort of reviewing the work that's been done in the past on Lake Mitchell as it relates to application of alum or other treatment methods, and hopefully answer questions that folks might have as to what our plan is, on this current project and just kind of how the process works in general. And so Greg has some slides put together, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to Greg.
All right, thank you, Eric. I'm hoping, Eric, can you let me know if you're seeing the presentation mode here?
Yep, I am.
PowerPoint. Okay, great. In that case, I'll jump to the first slide here just to give you some more background on some of what has happened here more recently with discussions about Lake Mitchell and water quality. What some of our key conclusions were about the internal load control project, which was that we've got water quality impairment in Lake Mitchell that is primarily due to both external watershed sources as well as internal sources of phosphorus that changed the water quality for the worse throughout the summer in the lake. And so without reductions in phosphorus contributions from both the watershed and the internal sources, the expectation is that there would not be a way to improve water quality without reducing either one or both of them. So it's unlikely that water quality targets would be consistently met, and so water quality standards that are set by the state of South Dakota. And so, and if you do nothing, in all likelihood, you're going to be looking at higher rates of impaired conditions for contact recreation. The types of recreation that you get from associated with swimming and boating, water skiing, that kind of thing. But then what comes with that too is increased algal abundance and algae blooms, and then those can result in health advisories as well as the potential for algal toxicity that can affect the health of both people and animals that may be using the lake. So the recommendations that were provided in one of the last meetings had to do with get to that. Okay, there it is. Key recommendations was to continue the investments that were already being made in reducing phosphorus contributions from the watershed, but then to also perform the internal load control project that was previously presented. And so what that involved was optimizing dredging, and especially in areas that had the highest concentrations of phosphorus in the sediment. But then we were making recommendations to supplement that in other selected areas with alum treatment that ultimately accounts for about a quarter of the total in-lake costs. This is outside of some of the other items like the drawdown costs and outside of that. But between dredging and alum really represented only about 25% of the total in-lake costs. But then we also made recommendations about planning for annual operation and maintenance of anything that you implement here. So I've got really three main topics that I wanted to cover today for this workshop. Wanted to talk about how alum treatments have worked in the past, talk more about our assessment of the previous applications that were done in the early 2000s, and then talk finally about how we think we can integrate alum into the overall internal load control project and make it more cost effective as a result of that. So just kind of give you some more background on internal sources of phosphorus. What they are is basically they're stored in the sediment. It's excess phosphorus levels that are stored in the sediment. When the sediment goes, when the water chemistry changes after you reach lower dissolved oxygen conditions near the bottom of the lake at the interface with the sediment, and so then phosphorus will get released. And so the P symbols here are really just a schematic representing phosphorus and how that would get released oftentimes in the summer. But then we can also get decay of organic material that's located within the sediment. And that itself has phosphorus in it too, which can also get released. So there's a couple different mechanisms for how internal sources of phosphorus get released. So what we have done, what's actually been done, there's about a 50-year track record now with using alum, which is a chemical precipitant to tie up phosphorus, the phosphorus that would otherwise get released. So this has been successful in lake treatments for going on 50 years now. And what is alum? Well, it like I said, it is a chemical precipitant. It has actually been used in the past for pickling. It has several other uses though too. It's been used to treat water and wastewater sources, especially for municipalities, and it is safe and non-toxic and non-hazardous as long as it is controlled, as long as the pH is controlled in your source water. And really what it's being, the way it works is it forms a flock which sweeps, as it settles to the bottom of the lake, it sweeps out phosphorus both from the water column, but then it creates a reactive barrier at the bottom of the lake, and it stays reactive long enough to continue to tie up phosphorus that would otherwise get released from the sediment. What we really like about it is that it works regardless of whether or not there's low dissolved oxygen or not. So it will work whether you have oxygen or you don't in the bottom of the lake. So this next figure, these next couple photos here show how alum is typically applied. It's really, on a bigger project, you'll have a barge with a number of different tanks, potentially, that would store alum that would get loaded on shore. And then it's really just a matter of the barge going back and forth across the lake. And in this case, what we've been seeing really for more than probably 20 years now is that the folks that are doing these alum treatments have computerized capabilities within the cab of their, just within their piloting system, so that it's programmed and tied into mapping that we would produce that would prescribe what kind of dose should be applied. And that dose can vary across the surface of the lake. The computer system in this barge that you see in the photo on the top left would be is tied into that map, but the way that it's injecting the alum into the water just below the surface of the water is tied in with both the where it is on the lake and at the speed at which it is traveling. And then what you see in the next photo below that is how it looks after it gets injected just below the surface. It starts to really spread out, diffuse out, and then start to create a flock after that will slowly settle to the bottom of the lake. We engineered the biggest alum treatment in Minnesota a few years back. It was done over several phases, and so I've just got a couple photos that show how that looked at the beginning of the alum treatment, and then 2 weeks later on the very last day of the alum treatment. And so what you're really doing is not only are you removing phosphorus, and in this case what was beneficial is that the phosphorus that the algae was using that turns the water green, like you see on the left-hand side of that photo, was removed so that then the water quality was much clearer After that, it reduced phosphorus levels significantly by a factor of 4. And the algae levels were dropped very close to the detection limit after this, on the last day of the alum treatment. And then the benefit of that has continued for a few years after that occurred. And so we're continuing to monitor that lake. And but to date, it has worked very well on that treatment. And so it was really a byproduct of everything that you see here with the way that it gets applied. So when we do start to talk about how long these treatments might last, there's a number of factors that come into play. Like I said, when the alum reaches the bottom of the lake, it is still reactive, usually for at least a year or two. And but then long term, what it's really doing is it's tying up that phosphorus. And the only thing that would change the amount of phosphorus that would otherwise come out of the sediment would just be new sedimentation from new deposits of phosphorus on top of what ultimately will become an inert byproduct of the alum tying up the phosphorus. And so it would take several years after an alum treatment for internal load to slowly return. Got a couple colleagues from our office here that have actually published research on why or why not some of these alum treatments have been successful in the past. And for the most part, most of what they've seen on lake treatments that weren't successful is they either just didn't have a high enough alum dose or that watershed phosphorus load reduction was needed to improve the success of these treatments. And so that's been published, and it's a really good guide on what to account for when it comes to making sure that you've got what you need to improve and optimize these treatments as much as you can. Let's see, I am going to just briefly stop and ask if anyone has any questions right now before I go to the next topic about the previous alum applications at Lake Mitchell.
Greg, I have a question. So
Yeah.
I think that one of the questions that probably everyone is thinking, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people are probably thinking right now, then why not just do alum? Why dredge if alum works so well?
Yeah, great question. And what you'll see, I do have a good figure, I think, that helps us better understand the choices that we've made in terms of making these recommendations. And in large part, it has a lot to do with the fact that we really, we know that there are high levels of phosphorus in the sediment, and that they are, that we would need to apply a lot of alum in several different locations if that was going to be the only solution. And so the dose that we think we would need to have is going to be more cost effective in some of the deeper locations of the lake, whereas we think that cost-wise, the dredging is going to be more cost effective in the shallower reaches of the lake, and especially the areas outside of the deepest the channel, what was the original channel running through the lake before the reservoir was created. So, yeah, that's really why we were talking about both approaches for controlling internal phosphorus load.
Hey, Greg, I got a question on that. You say that you're putting your alum with a boom. It looks like a boom on the back of a barge. And you're doing it variable rate?
Yeah, I can do a variable rate. I'm just going back to that slide here. And so, yeah, for example, if the barge is going across the middle of the lake and we want to apply a higher dose there, when it's like I said, it's a computerized system that is scanned in a map that we have given it for different zones that we would provide different dosing rates for. And then the barge has a GPS system, so it knows where it is in relation to the map and the dosing plan. And then depending on the speed that it's going at, it is then programmed to inject the right amount of alum just barely below the surface of the lake there. So that's kind of what you're seeing coming out the back of the boom here, is that these are just tubes that are feeding in the alum from the tanks, and then the bottom of the tube just is a few inches below the surface of the lake. And then a combination of the engine in the back of the barge causes what you see in this next photo, where it creates enough turbulence to really spread out the alum in a good way, I guess, to get the best possible coverage of the sediment when it does settle to the bottom.
So I got fields that we do variable rate east of Mitchell. And we go out every 2 years and soil sample, and we sample at 4 acres each one to get the variable rate that we need on that precision acres. So is this the same, similar to what you're doing here or not? Do you sample that every 4 acres? Or how do you get your map for that to go into the computer to apply all your chemicals?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do have a figure later that I can point out, part of a more detailed response to your question. But the reality is we've got sediment samples. What we're relying on sediment samples that have been collected throughout the lake. So yeah, that in many ways, I think that is a good way of putting it. Is that we know the variability of sediment phosphorus levels and the kind of sediment phosphorus that is contributing to the most to internal load. And so yeah, we're using that to generate our corresponding dose rates that we would want to apply
So you
in the places that we want to use alum.
So you need to answer the question of mine, is that do you sample every 4 acres, or how do you sample the bottom?
Oh,
Is it a much larger
well,
scale?
we're driving sediment cores into the bottom of the sediment, and then we pull those out of the core, and then we break them up into little slices that we test each slice for the levels of phosphorus in each one, and then we're using that and our past experience to estimate what we think the optimal dose is for turning up the right amount of phosphorus to address the internal load at any given place across the lake.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Most of it.
Okay, well, we can talk more about that.
Hang on,
when they
Greg.
come to-
Got another one.
Greg, I've got a question.
Yeah.
In that slide that you have up there on the Spring Lake treatment, do you know what the parts per billion phosphorus was when you started and what it was when you were done? What did you reduce it from and
Yeah, it was
to?
about,
You said 4 times reduction, but where did you start and where did you end?
we were actually up around 280 parts per billion on the left at the time that the left picture was taken. By the time we got done with the treatment, or on the last day of the treatment, we took another sample and it was down closer to 50 parts per billion
Thank you.
on the last day of the treatment. Yeah, so it really made a significant reduction, and then that carried through into the next year. And but this was actually just even the first phase of our alum treatment. So we can talk more about this, but we would be looking at a phased approach again here for Lake Mitchell.
You mentioned,
Let's see,
go ahead.
go ahead.
You had mentioned that this lake in Minnesota you had done years ago and it's continuing to look good. How's the size comparison of that lake and what did it cost to Lake Mitchell?
On that lake, it was, as I recall, about 450 acres, so not as big as Lake Mitchell. And the phosphorus levels aren't as high as they are at Lake Mitchell, and the watershed's smaller compared to Lake Mitchell. But yeah, otherwise, it's generally very similar. And the costs, and of course, the thing about it's hard to compare Lake Mitchell to that example, just because in Lake Mitchell, like I said, we're looking at doing a combination of both dredging and alum treatment. But yeah, that's, I think it's very good. It's in the right ballpark, I guess, in terms of thinking about how these work and how to optimize the way that you do them. I better get into my next topic here, just so
Greg,
that we don't,
real quick, Greg, do you know the cost of that Spring Lake project? What was the cost of it?
Yeah, it was a little more than $1 million at the time, which it started almost 10 years ago, and we finished the last phase maybe about 5 years ago, or about 4 or 5 years ago. So we chopped it up into 3 separate phases of work, and so then ultimately it did cost a little more than $1 million to do that.
Okay. That answers your question.
So what?
Go ahead.
Yeah, if you have any other questions, let me know.
I think we're good. Continue on.
Okay. Well, I wanted to make sure that I covered the next topic here, which is I kind of go back through and diagnose, I guess, what we think might have happened in the early 2000s when the alum demonstration project was done on Lake Mitchell. And so really what I show here is 3 separate years in volumes of alum that were applied to the lake. And in the first case, in 2003, it was based on the water volume in terms of how it was. The dose was really no different across the surface of the lake in 2004 and 5. And then alum was only applied to water depths of 12 feet or greater. So then the investigator at that point did, after that was done in 2006, wrote a progress report about that. And at the time, it was believed that those first 3 years of application represented about 44% of the total dose that they thought was needed. And in between there was some other sampling that was done, including some sediment sampling in 2004. So I'm going to go quickly through what they found in 2006 when they published what they saw after having done each of the 3 years of alum applications on Lake Mitchell. And one thing to keep note of is just what whether or not it was a wet or dry year in each one of those years. And what this chart just shows is how flow and the load of phosphorus attached to the flow varied in comparison to the long-term average. And so normally what you would expect would happen in Lake Mitchell and the watersheds is it got a long history of having higher flows in the spring and early summer, and then it tails off to where you get very low, if any flow at all, in the fall and into the early winter. 2003 was actually so dry that there was almost no flow at all while the alum was being applied, but then it was the first year in which alum was being applied. Whereas in 2004 and 5, almost a full year's amount of flow happened all within about a 1 month period. So it was kind of unusual, and it helps us if we keep that in mind when we start to look at how phosphorus levels changed for each one of the 3 years. And so 2003, the alum got, you can kind of almost guess from looking at the red line and the markers on the red axis here, how phosphorus levels changed in response to the alum that was applied. So in fact, the width of this arrow shows the period of time. It's just within a few days that all of the alum was applied, and then you can see there was a nice response to the phosphorus levels, but since it was the first year of alum application, phosphorus did gradually increase and probably due to internal load. And so in large part, it's because it was probably no more than maybe, a little more than maybe 10% of the total dose was applied in that first year. And so it shouldn't be too surprising that internal load continued to happen and did affect the water quality later in that year. Now, if I look at the blue line, that in 2004, that was the year where a second round of alum was applied, but was applied earlier in the spring. And so there again, phosphorus levels dropped significantly in response to the alum application. But then as time got into this wetter period, then phosphorus levels started to come up in response to that. And then they went up a little bit more, but not as far as they did in 2003. And in all likelihood, the increase from here to here is due to watershed sources. The increase from here to there is from internal sources. And then that kind of takes us into 2005, which was very much the same kind of year as 2004. But the difference was that alum was getting applied after some of that wetter period occurred in June. And so I'm just going to throw up a shaded black here that just shows where most of this wetter flow happened in those 2 years of 2004 and 5. And so in 2005, though, it started out with a lower phosphorus level from the year before it. It started to respond significantly to the external sources or watershed sources. The alum that was applied dropped it, but not by very much. And then you can see that that internal sources continued to contribute to degraded water quality the rest of that year. So the desired effect was not realized in any one of the years, but for different reasons. 2003 because it was the first time that alum had been applied, and then 2004 and 5 was really affected significantly by the watershed loading that occurred in June. So then the report goes on to recommend that they should apply the remaining dose, which I mentioned in one of my previous slides was about 56% yet of the overall total that they were hoping to apply. It was recommended that the rest of that get applied, and that they consider microplaque injections of alum in the future if necessary. My own personal assessment of what I saw from this data and the write-up on it is that I just think that their original dose was not as high as it needed to be. And then along with these other problems that we just talked about as related to the watershed contributions and how that affected results. And then the other thing is that the dose that was suggested back then was not really targeted to individual areas. It was really just applied into all of the water that was deeper than 12 feet. And so part of what would be different about what we're recommending is, some of those areas that are shallower than 12 feet, they would get dredged. And so they themselves have phosphorus in them and are probably also contributing significantly to the internal load. So that's kind of where we start to look at how we would integrate what was done before, taking into account what was done before, what we've collected for both water quality and sediment monitoring results, and then using that information to integrate alum into the overall solution for the proposed internal load control project. So I don't know if anyone has questions at this point, but otherwise I've got a couple more slides to talk more specifically about that.
Why don't you go through your slides? We've got about 10 minutes left, so go through your slides, and then if there's time, they can ask questions.
Yeah. Sounds good. So yeah, my last topic was what I just described here, integrating and so this, in some ways, I'm hoping to kind of just revisit the question that was asked before. You hopefully can see that there are some points on this map, and these represent all of the places that sediment cores were collected and tested. And so we have, whether it was by us or by the previous consultant that worked on this, we have that information. We used it to really look at how different phosphorus levels were, and we chopped this up into really 6 separate areas because we know that phosphorus levels in the sediment in area 1 are really high. Area 2 is maybe about 75% as high as area 1. 3, 4, and 5 are about half as much as it is at area 1, and then 6 is slightly lower than that. So we really have just separated out where we would take a different approach, whether it's dredging in areas 1 and 2 because of the higher phosphorus levels and the shallower water there. We think that's going to be most cost effective. Then outside of the main channel, which corresponds with the darker colors here, that would be where we would do alum in the deeper part of these 3, 4, and 5 segments. But outside of that, in the shallower areas, do the dredging, and so that's what we're suggesting there. And then area 6 would be the whole area would be done with alum. And so ultimately, what our internal load control recommendations involve is addressing more than 90% of the total lake area. We would stay within the targeted budget. Alum treatment, like I said before, represents just under a quarter of the total cost. In comparison, when you consider it at the same time as what it might cost to do the dredging for the other areas. But the big difference between what was done in the early 2000s and what we'd be suggesting here is that we'd end up with a total higher overall dose within the areas that do have alum, but about 3 times higher than what was used in the early 2000s. We think that's what's needed really to control that source of phosphorus for those areas where we would do alum. But we would use different zones and different application rates that are tied into the sediment phosphorus levels. So then those recommendations are that we would adjust that design as we move through different phases of future work, whether it's the initial design, we can get quotes, we can look at bids that might come in, and then phase everything in a way so that when it comes time to implement the work, you can get the best bang for the buck in terms of, like I said before, what we've done is really have phased out these alum applications over multiple years to get the best possible benefit. And then in the process after that is really just react to what we see with monitoring, whether it's the lake or hopefully some newer sediment phosphorus monitoring. We can change how we might approach each phase of alum treatment. It should also, in future years for operation and maintenance considerations, the amount of phosphorus or the amount of alum that would get applied in future years could also be tied into how well watershed phosphorus load reductions are being realized. But the big thing that I think that alum will do for you is that it provides protection on that initial in-lake investment that you would be making on the dredging, both on the dredging side, the benefits you're going to get from dredging, but also the benefits from the first phase of alum treatment. Each successive alum treatment after that will really provide more assurance that and protect that investment that you're making on the in-lake control side of this. So I think that's my last slide. If you have any other questions about it, let me know.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
I have one.
Okay.
So when I look at the barge that you're using to spread the alum, it looks pretty, I mean, for lack of a better word, and, I'm not trained in precision ag, but it seems like it's basically a barge that has big barrels of alum and, what did you call it, Danny? The boom, and a boom. So is this something that like a city could invest in one of those and use some of the precision farming techniques where you've got, GPS, and would that save us any money if we were to do something along those lines, since this is something that presumably we're looking at doing for the long haul to, maintain our...
That's a great question. And I think that is definitely like on this slide here, when we start talking about designing, we can adjust the way that this would get done if you consider alternative ways to do it. Normally on these smaller lakes, it's just easier to hire a contractor that already has that equipment. You're only going to have them out there maybe for a couple of weeks at the most, even on the biggest and some of the other bigger lake projects. But that's kind of why we talked about just adjusting our basis for, maybe in response to bids, because it could just be that we might find out that that if we can get somebody trained in on doing that, maybe similar to the way that other municipalities are doing lake harvesting of lake weeds and some of those other things, if you can actually have personnel that are dedicated to just doing alum treatment, it's conceivable that that could save you money over the long run, especially, given the scale of this operation as we're talking about it here and the costs that are involved. So yeah, I guess yes to your question.
Hold on, Mr. Smith has a question here.
I'll have a quick one here. Eric or Greg, I guess, some of the comments that we're beginning possibly with some citizens and so forth is the fact of why would you do both the dredging and the watershed at the same time? And that's one of probably the biggest questions that is probably out in our community. If you could just address that, if you could, please.
Yeah, I think maybe the best way to get at it is because, you folks may recall seeing this graph before. We talked about how really, whether it was an in-lake reduction or watershed reduction, when we started charting out where we thought water quality would be in relation to any of our potential goals that we had, we really know that we need to make significant reductions both in the lake as well as from the watershed. And yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think what you can do though is you can adapt to what's happening in the watershed, and like I said, do the work that we're talking about with the phasing here. Whether it has to do with alum or just the timing of dredging and then followed by alum treatments. Really think that that's the way to kind of get things started. So you can start to see a much greater benefit with these in-lake reductions that these initial investments in the in-lake reductions than you will with the watershed load reductions. And, the one thing that to keep in mind about these graphs is they are all based on total phosphorus. And what's really nice about alum treatments is that they're tying up phosphorus that is dissolved. And so this is the form of phosphorus that every molecule of phosphorus that's getting released from the sediment is available for growth by algae. Whereas some of the phosphorus coming in from the watershed is attached to other sediment or other particulates, and so it's really not bioavailable. So I just do think that from a visual standpoint, you're going to notice a much more significant improvement by reducing a pound of internal source of phosphorus compared to a pound of the watershed component. So that's another reason to start with the internal load control, really any time, somewhat earlier than maybe what you would do from the watershed perspective.
Let me add something to that, Greg. We control the lake. We don't control the land around Firestill Creek. So we're at the mercy of the landowners around Firestill Creek to work with us to do something in the watershed. Now, they are helping us, and we're working towards that, but we don't have any control over whether or not we can do anything out in the watershed, where we can control what goes on in the lake.
Right, and that's what I think that the internal load control recommendations that we've made, they are taking into account, and you can, some of the phasing that I talked about, that would allow you to change the response that you've got based on what you're seeing in the future. You can adapt to this future monitoring. So, but these are things that you will have. That is one of the benefit of something like alum treatment, is it gives you control. It's a way for you to reduce a load that really is not getting reduced any other way right now. And by splitting it up into multiple phases And then in setting aside budget for future operation and maintenance considerations, that is where you will get control over something, like you said, that today you maybe don't have a lot of control over. I think that's one thing that makes this attractive.
We're running out of time, so if you got one more quick question for him. Mr. Allen, you got something?
Yeah, I just want to know what you've seen in the last year to the last 10 years of fluctuation in Allen prices. Was there a big gap or from the COVID or anything?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There were fluctuations that were tied into the pandemic. What we did see was that prices came up towards the tail end of the pandemic. I had bid out a couple projects that were coming in at maybe 30% higher than they were before the pandemic. But then I have seen more recently, when we have budgeted for newer projects, that the price we think is coming back down a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that it'll ever come back to where it was before the pandemic. But yeah, that's a good question, and something that our costs do take into account what we think are today's rates.
Okay. Anybody else have anything quick? All right, thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you presenting to us.
Okay, you bet.
Thank you.
Eric and Greg, if you're going to stay on, just please mute for later on during the.
I got rid of them. Sorry.
Oh, you hung up on him?
I hung up on them.
No, I have to have the volume muted for the, okay.
Okay. We got about, 2 minutes, 3 minutes before we start a regular meeting. You want to take a quick break?
I gotta go.
They were all saying
Nothing about
Cindy.
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation by Grace Baptist.
Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, your word reminds us that we are to be thankful for all things, and even the weather. And Lord, we can be thankful that we're not wading through the snow today, and it reminds us that you're in charge of all things in this whole universe. But Lord, we're thankful for the freedom that we have in America and the privilege we have to be living in America today. And we have, along with the freedom, we have responsibilities and we have privileges. And Lord, we thank you that we can participate in our government, and we know that it starts even here. So Lord, I pray that you would give wisdom to those that make decisions. We're just a small spot in the world, but we're important to all those around us. And these decisions that are made here are important to the people who live around here. So Lord, we pray that your will would be done in Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Sabers. Here. Rice.
Here.
Dosher. McCardle.
Here.
Barrington.
Here.
Allen. Charts. Here. Smith.
Here. Okay, we have a quorum. I want to point out before we go into consent agenda items that we will be splitting our executive session. We will have a short, very short executive session prior to the Board of Adjustment. Approval of consent agenda items. Items appearing on the consent agenda may be removed by a city council member for discussion to begin the formal agenda items. Anybody wish to remove anything? Anything you wish to discuss?
I don't want to remove anything, but I was looking at all of the things that we are putting up for declaring surplus that will be on the Purple Wave. And I wondered if any of those, if those are available to the public to view, and if someone in our community wanted to purchase those things. Is that a possibility?
Mrs. Bathke, you want to explain how that's going to happen?
Only through Purple Wave. So they can definitely jump on the Purple Wave website and bid on any of the auction items once they are listed. We do post the link on our website as well when they will be listed and published in the paper.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anything else? There are a number of board appointments you can note there.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. McCardle, second by Mr. Barrington. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Or these? Okay, roll call, please.
Smith.
Aye.
Charts.
Aye.
Allen.
Aye.
Barrington. McCardle.
Aye.
Dosher. Rice. Sabers.
Motion carries. Citizens input. If you need to address mayor or member of city council on an item that is not on the agenda, excluding personnel items, please come forward to the podium, state your name and your concern. Presentations are limited to 3 minutes. Items will be considered, but no action will be taken at this time. I want to start out by welcoming the girls golf team from Mitchell High School. If you ladies would come up here, please. We have a proclamation to read for you. Coaches, you can come up too. Don't be shy. These ladies had an awesome year this year, ending up with the state title and some high personal. So, come on over. Congratulations on your year. Proclamation in honor of the Mitchell Colonel High School Girls Golf Team 2023 State AA Champions. Whereas the City of Mitchell believes that student athletes are an important part of the Mitchell community, whereas under the leadership of head coach Jeff Meyerink and assistant coach Riker Kreitzfeld, the 2023 Mitchell High School Girls Golf Team won 10 of the 14 tournaments they played during the 2023 season, never placing below third place. Whereas the 2023 girls golf team ended their season by claiming the girls AA state golf championship title for the first time in the history of Mitchell High School. Whereas in addition to claiming the 2023 state AA girls golf championship title, the Mitchell Colonels golf team had 2 athletes place high individually in the state tournament as well. Allison Meyerink took second place in a playoff after tying for first place.
Allison had the lowest score of the day one in the tournament and also had a lowest average 74 in all classes of the state tournament. Quinn Dannebring placed fourth in the state tournament and had the lowest score for day two of the state tournament. Whereas the accomplishments of these athletes on this team are admired and respected by the Mitchell community and demonstrate the character that the athletes of the Mitchell High School possess, excuse me, whereas the City of Mitchell would like to recognize the 2023 Mitchell High School girls golf team for representing the Mitchell community in such a positive way and congratulate them on their state championship. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Mitchell wishes to convey a very special recognition by way of this proclamation to the Mitchell High School 2023 girls golf team in honor of this accomplishment. Dated this 20th day of June 2023, signed Bob Everson, Mayor, City of Mitchell.
There's the microphone right there. Good.
Nobody wants to talk, all right.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, she's over there, okay, good.
Okay, well, first of all, we just want to thank.
Tell them your name. So
I'm Laura Woodstrom. I was a senior this year. And we just want to thank the mayor and you guys for inviting us in today and recognizing us. And we want to thank the community for all the support we've gotten throughout the season. And also thank Eric and Jason out at the golf course, because not often do you get a superintendent to come out every day and ask on a daily basis how the green speeds are. And we really appreciate that. And Jaylee and I over there, we're the two seniors leaving this year, but there's still a lot behind us, and this team's going to be really good for the years to come. So we thank you.
All right, thank you, girls. Congratulations. Good job. Okay, now after that, anybody else wish to have public commentary? Nobody? Anybody on council have anything they want to add? Okay. We'll need to move into executive session per South Dakota Codified Law 125-23 legal, so we'll take a few minutes to go into my motion by Mr. Rice, second by Mr. McCardle. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. My office, please.
I've been looking at these things about last day out. It's gonna be like 27. Oh, we're right here. Basically, it's been 7 times, so everyone's waiting ahead of time. It's like super unimportant stuff, so they can just give us one.
Not too much about cost in there. They didn't elaborate on cost. We kind of know.
So you want to cap that?
Sure. No, I'm talking about ongoing maintenance. Yes. So to control that cost, once you have everything done, like what you want to do, you have a projection system that you
Well, it sounds like it's
That's all.
I don't know if stuff. I don't think it's split. If I had to
So there's no
Maybe a little bit of distance from the end, make it good.
Didn't hear any more. Maybe you're right. In my office. What are you here? Oh, most of the lake. West Virginia field British. That's
Sorry, didn't mean to hang up on you guys. Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order. Board of Adjustment, entertain a motion for City Council to recess and sit as the Board of Adjustment.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Rice, second by Mr. Allen. Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing and action on the application for Jensen Capital and Development LLC conditional use permit. Jensen Capital and Development LLC has applied for conditional use permit to construct multifamily dwelling units located at 1303 South Olman Street, legally described as the east 625 feet of Lot X, lying north of X-2 in the northeast quarter of Section 29, Township 103 North, Range 60 West of the 5th Prime Meridian, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Mr. Jenigas.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 4-0 with 1 abstention and 2 absent. They would like to put some multifamily dwellings on there. The drawing shows duplexes, but they're thinking of doing triplexes there instead. Since it's in highway business, they will have to do a site plan and go back in front of Planning Commission before any building permit can be issued for that. We did not hear anything from any neighbors. It was published in the paper, sign was posted. I can answer any questions that you have.
I've got one question, perhaps more for Justin. We had the drainage lawsuit in that area. Does this have any impact with that?
Well, this would just be the conditional use permit for it, so it would still need to go through the full building permit process, and I know drainage would be considered as part of that.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Sabers.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Charks. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing and action on the application of the Flower Shop LLC conditional use permit. Flower Shop LLC has applied for conditional use permit to operate a medical cannabis dispensary located at 100 North Main Street, legally described as Lot 7, Block 12, original plat of town, now city, of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota, said property zone CB Central Business. Mr. Jenigas.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Planning Commission motion to recommend approval, 2 for, 3 against, and 2 absent, so the motion failed. Letters were sent out to neighbors. It was published in the paper. Signs posted. We received 4 letters against that were in your packet, 0 in favor. There were 15 letters sent out for this one. Some of the comments for it were to be a detriment to the future development of the area. It's across from the Veterans Park. Tax revenue isn't worth it. Won't revitalize downtown. Is a history for in the central business area. You have had 2 previous come in front of the boards. Genesis Farms at 716th North Rowley was approved in central business, and the conditional use for them prior to that at 5th and Main was approved, but the variance was disapproved, and that's what stopped that one because it was too close to churches and counseling services for there. I can answer any questions that you have for me on this.
Okay. Any comment? We'll entertain a motion.
I'll get it started and I'll move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Rice.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Come on up.
My name's Don Dahl. I manage several restoration projects here on Main Street. I'm not disputing that the benefits of medical marijuana, but I do raise concern with the use of dispensaries for its distribution. How many dispensaries do we need for medical marijuana? The answer that I come up with is that it's for future use for when they legalize the personal use of marijuana. When we first started looking at Mitchell for investment opportunities, we were impressed by the city's enthusiasm and desire to bring Main Street back to life. You shared with us your passions, your expectations, and we caught a vision of a hometown-style Main Street. Our experience and fears from California are that the legalization of marijuana lowers standards, lowers expectations, along with a number of issues. This trend was going to change the city of Mitchell. It's going to change South Dakota, as it has in California and other states. The door's been opened and you're not going to be able to close it. The decisions you make now will set precedents. We're asking you to maintain higher standards, greater expectations for Mitchell's Main Street. We need good quality business on Main Street that will support a community. We're going to be bringing 100-plus residents into this area. The dispensary is the wrong image, as far as I'm concerned, for a hometown Main Street. Main Street is Mitchell's front door, doorstep, front porch. I live on Main Street, it's my front porch. I'm asking you, please, don't bring the trash out on the front porch. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Excuse me, anybody else wish to address this? Okay, council, any discussion?
I share your concerns. Unfortunately, when we set up this ordinance, there were certain parameters that we decided that we needed to abide by for every applicant that applied for a conditional use permit for the medical marijuana. Whatever my personal opinions are or are not, in South Dakota, it's the law that this is legal. And so we set out that ordinance, and at the time, I feel like we were I was saying to Justin today, it was a little bit like we were the blind leading the blind because we'd never done this before, and we did our best to create an ordinance that was going to cover all of the concerns that we might have. And one of the things that we didn't consider was, for example, a distance from a park. For example, I know that's one of the arguments that has been proposed. At the end of the day, this business fits the criteria of the ordinance that we have in place. And we don't really have any grounds to deny it. We've set a precedence by approving other medical marijuana dispensaries in similar locations or that have similar issues. And to deny this one would, I think it would be prejudicial, maybe. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's an ideal location personally. And if I had a really good way to make a case for denying it, I probably would, because I share your concern about it being on Main Street. But unfortunately, I don't think that we have the grounds, in my opinion, and in our legal advice, I don't know that we have any grounds for denying this as it is currently, in terms of just where where this is located. So, yeah, I thought maybe I would just share that with you. Whether we agree with you or not, it's probably not something that we're going to be able to deny on those grounds.
Okay, anything else from council?
How many letters did you put in?
I sent out 15 letters, 4 were returned.
Returned, and they're all against.
All against, yes.
Okay, anything else?
If I can,
Come on up.
so, my name is Peter Deacon. I'm the owner of the flower shop. So I just wanted to come here before you guys. We're looking to move into this community and just run state compliant regulated dispensary. I understand you sent out 15 letters. 4 of them came back no and 2 yes. 0 yes. So chances are when people get these letters, and most of them do not reply back to it because they don't care or they don't mind it. As a matter of fact, I know one of them for sure because the person we're buying the property from, she got one of the letters. She owns the business right across the street, so she's okay with it, So there's people that, they don't necessarily, they stay neutral in it, They don't reply back. Only a few people that will send the letters back on an issue, But we're looking to update the building, do renovations on the interior and exterior on it, obviously with approval. It's old building, needs work. There's weeds growing on the side of it. Nobody really takes care of it a whole lot. We're going to replace the glass, some of the siding, of course, with approval.
it's just, it needs a little bit of work, and I'm willing to spend the money and put in the work, you know, so that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
One of the, stay up there for just a second. One of the concerns that was expressed to me was regarding the odor that's,
Yeah.
can you talk to us about what
So-
you do to prevent that odor?
We do have filtration system that will mitigate some of that, but and the only reason why we have that because the ordinance requires it. There's really no odor in the dispensaries. You're gonna have odor in the cultivation when you're growing stuff. Dispensary, you're gonna have some smell when you come inside, but not really on the outside of it. There's very minimal when it comes to that. Also, there's police station. You can see police station right across the street. So when you think about safety, I mean, you can't get any closer than that. They're watching your front door. The veterans, most of our customers in Sioux Falls, they're veterans. Usually they're not against it as far as that goes, so. There's not odor. Odor's never an issue in a dispensary, so.
Anybody else have questions for Mr. Deacon?
So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion to approve the conditional use. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing an action on the application for Cornpel Stampede Incorporated, conditional use permit. Cornpel Stampede Inc. has applied for conditional use permit to operate rodeo grounds located at North Olman Street, north of Industrial Road. No address created at this time. Legally describes Lot 1 of the south half of the northwest quarter of Section 33, Township 104 North, Range 60 West of the 5th Prime Meridian. Said lot formerly within boundaries of Mitchell Municipal Airport, Mitchell, South Dakota. Said property is owned PL and Institutional District. Mr. Janigas.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 5-0 with 2 absent. Letters were sent out to neighbors, posted in the paper, signed, published. We did not receive any letters back from this. You can see the preliminary area of the area. The legal description is the red boundary. The green boundary is the lease that you have approved a year or so ago. The blue area is what their proposed arena site itself would be, and I believe I have a picture of that in the packet as well. Parking will be to the east of this for patrons coming to visit, and then contestants will be to the north of this. There are still some bugs, obviously, to work out for it, but this is the first step of it. I can answer any questions that you have for me.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Sabers. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Hearing an action on the application for Habitat for Humanity variance permit. Habitat for Humanity has applied for a variance permit for a rear yard setback of 16 feet versus 25 feet and a front yard setback of 18 feet versus 25 feet for construction of a house with a rear deck and front porch located at 505 South Langdon Street, legally described as Lot 81A of Overlook Addition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Said property is owned R2 Single Family Residential. Mr. Janigas.
Mr. Mayor, Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 5-0 with 2 absent. Letters were sent out to neighbors, published in the paper, signs posted. We did not receive anything back from this at all. When this was platted a couple of years ago, we knew they were smaller lots or 50-foot wide lots. Obviously, the north one is a little shallower. Habitat for Humanity built the one to the south. They are going to be building the one to the north. With their setbacks, they're trying to keep the houses as close in line as possible because they're going to use a shared driveway between them to try and help cut some costs down. Really, it's 23 and 24 feet for your setbacks without the deck or that porch there. There will be sidewalk around that as well. I can answer any questions you have for me on this as well.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. McCardle. Second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion?
I toured the Habitat house when we dedicated the first one, and we were talking about the concept that we wanted 2 houses there, and I think this should work and actually look pretty good.
Yeah.
Is this one occupied? This house is not-
No, this one's not built
This
yet.
one isn't built yet. The south one, yep.
The south one is occupied, yes.
And they're both 1,000, 1,040 square foot houses. They're not big houses that they're trying to overstep their boundaries by any means.
Is that a roadway behind it, or is it an alley?
It's an alley behind
And
it.
is it an unimproved alley? Is it any, does anyone use it?
It does get used, yep, but it's typical city alley.
Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to set the date for Board of Adjustment hearing 7/5/23. Jody Holford's applied for conditional use permit to operate a family residential daycare located at 314 East 10th, legally described as Lot 10, Block 8, D.A. Scott's First Edition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Real property, said property is zoned R2, single family.
Set the date.
Motion by Mrs. Chark, second by Mr. Rice. Discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action set date for Board of Adjustment hearing 7/5/23. Jennifer Gerfen has applied for conditional use permit to operate a family residential daycare located at 1026 North Langdon Street, legally described as west 81 feet of Lot 5, Block 4, D.A. Scott's Second Edition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Said property is zoned R4, high density. Mr. Barrington? Second by Mr. McCardle. Discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this one? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action set date for Board of Adjustment hearing 7/5/23. Bailey Week has applied for conditional use permit to operate a family residential daycare located at 308 South Menser Street, legally described as Lot 7 and 8, Block 9, Applegate Addition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Real property is zoned R4, high density. Motion by Mr. Smith, second by Mrs. Charks. Discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this one? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action set date for Board of Adjustment hearing 7/5/23. Aaron Pemrick has applied for a variance permit for a setback from an alley of 7 feet versus 16 feet for an overhead garage door parallel to the alley for a garage addition located at 209 East 7th, legally described as Lot 4, Block 7, Raleigh's First Edition, City of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Said property is zoned NS Neighborhood Shopping.
Move set the date. Second.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. McCardle. Discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this one? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Entertain a motion, Board of Adjustment, to adjourn and City Council reconvene regular session. Motion by Mr. Barrington, second by Mr. Rice. Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to award bid for Golf Course Improvements Project 2023-2. Mr. Nelson, you're up.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Kevin Nelson, Park and Rec Director. Bids were opened on May 31st. 2 bids were received, the lowest bid being Dunick Incorporated. Their base bid was $680,300. Staff were recommending awarding that base bid, and it's minus the $10,000, it's alternate 5 on there. And in order to make this happen, our budgeted amount was $558,36 for this year. In order to make that happen for next year, we're asking an additional $180,000 in the 2024 budget, and that would include about a 9% contingency.
We got a few things. I'm a liaison for the Lakeview Golf Course, and naturally the bids came in high. It's a project where if, in order to cut, you're hindering the project. It's not worth doing. It's the 11 there. It's tee boxes and greens, and there's nothing you can cut out. You can see all the stuff on there that they were going to, if the bid comes in that they could add, they had them bid that. But I'm going to vote yes, because it needs to be done in order for the project to look good, and I think it's going to be a very nice addition to Lakeview and for the city of Mitchell. So I'll make a motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Savers.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Further discussion?
A question on the rock that we're taking out, the 4-inch rock. Can you kind of explain that a little bit, the reasoning behind that? Are we going to do some of our own work or not needed? Or why was it bid?
The rock is a choker layer. Why don't I bring Jason up and let him explain that? It's so I don't say something wrong, but Our old greens don't have it. I'm not sure in our new greens, but I'll let Jason explain that.
Jason Canary, Golf and Cemetery. So what the 4-inch layer of rock is, it's for drainage essentially. So when the water goes through the sand profile and it hits that, it's easier to get to the actual drain tile. So that's the purpose of it. It will pull water through quicker. But seeing as how our current greens do not have that, that would make these act more like our current greens. So that was why it was kind of left as an independent point to be able to pull out. So I've talked to the golf course architect, Kevin Norby, and I think him and I are comfortable with pulling that part out, so.
So this won't adversely affect what you're doing out there?
Nope, there are golf courses, new golf courses that are being built, whole golf courses that they take that part out. Will that green perform better with that? Yes, but if it's going to perform more like our current greens, that's also a benefit too. So that's the only reason why it was taken out.
Okay. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Okay, all those.
So wait, I do.
Oh.
I was just waiting to say that. So you might remember my concerns when we talked about this at budget time last year, a year ago. And one of my concerns was that historically, when an organization has come and asked for money for improvements in their, whatever it is, hockey arenas, swimming pools, I mean, choose your location or your sport or whatever it is, every time we ask for that group to come forward and put skin in the game, we talk about skin in the game all the time. And this is an unusual circumstance where we did not specifically ask for the golf course to have skin in the game. Now, let me just say, I know that the golf course does a lot of things that they don't come and ask for us to do money, ask for us to provide money for them. But this is a sizable project. I mean, this is more than $500,000 that we are already committed to put towards this project. So another $180,000 is a lot. And I keep thinking, gosh, if we had known that it was it was almost $200,000 more last summer when we were going through the budget process, would we have passed it? I don't know, maybe we would have, maybe we wouldn't have. But for me, I feel like this gives us an opportunity, a little window to allow the golf course to maybe step up and do some fundraising. And I know that when I brought this up to Kevin, he said, you know, we don't really have a fundraising arm. And I get that, but I also think that most of these organizations, the skateboarders, I mean, like I said, choose your sport, and they didn't probably have a fundraising arm prior to the time. I mean, we're talking about the lake tonight. We have Friends of Fire Still who are working to raise $1 to $3 million. So I understand that there may not be an organization, but this might be an opportunity where the golf course could, I don't know, I mean, I feel like, you know, you have a tournament, you bring sponsors in and you have them sponsor holes, and I don't know. I could think of ways that golf courses could raise money. There's lots of advertising potential out there. So I'm going to be voting against this, and it's not because I don't love golfers, because I do, but because I feel like this is an opportunity for maybe the golf course to do what we ask of virtually every other organization. I can't think of a time in the 10 years that I've been on the council that we haven't asked for something, for some kind of skin in the game by that organization. So I'm sorry, but I'm going to vote no for this.
Anybody else have a comment? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
No.
Okay. Motion carries. Action to award bid for concrete project 2023-4. Mr. Schrader.
Yep, Mr. Mayor, Council. Bids were opened on June 12th, City Hall Council Chambers at 1:30. 2 bids were received. Top top grade concrete being the low bid at $126,839. Bid tabulation is attached for your information. Staff does recommend awarding bid schedule A to top grade concrete. I did attach, right, we did not have a concrete bid last year because the top grade concrete actually moved their prices over from 21 into 22, honored their bid. I did attach a bid form from 10th Avenue, which was complete street reconstruction with curb and gutter sidewalks. Our prices this year are slightly higher than 10th Avenue, which is expected. This is miscellaneous repairs, not long runs, so it is a little more labor intensive. It's a little more expensive than what I want it to be. It does fit within our budget, however, and I am recommending approval. I can answer any questions you may have.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mrs. Charles. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Excuse me. Action to approve application for the Flower Shop LLC to transfer of a medical cannabis dispensary license. Mr. Johnson, are you handling this?
Yeah, so I probably won't have a whole lot more to add since you've already considered the conditional use tonight. All the basic facts are the same. Really, the only thing to note here is that this is the approval for the actual license itself, not the conditional use permit. And I think the only other thing that we didn't discuss the first time around is who this would be getting transferred from, and that would be from Vespi Wellness, who went into who was going to go into the old Runnings building. So I think with that, we could just open it up for questions.
I guess, and I don't have an issue, my only question is the timing of the $5,000 and the fee and all that type of stuff. Where does that fit in with end of year type stuff?
So at this point, applicant would have paid the transfer fee, which is the $5,000. Renewal fee at the end of the year would be another $5,000
Okay.
unless the council were to deviate from that.
Okay.
Okay, entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Rice. Second by Mr. Smith. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve resolution R 2023-17, plat of Canal Track 1, a subdivision of the southeast quarter, section 31, township 104 north, range 60 west of the 5th prime meridian, city of Mitchell, Davis County, South Dakota. Mr. Jenigas.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 5-0 with 2 absent. During discussion of this was back in March that they approved this. It had never been platted before, so it was really back out to the quarter and then as to who owned it. And there was some discussion that was brought up within this last 6 months or so about that, taxing purposes of it, ownership. A lot of people thought that the city owned it already, but looking back at records, they don't. I wasn't at the meeting with County Commission, but what I've been told is they're willing to abate the taxes that go back towards it, moving forward with this. If it does get approved with the plat, and then you have your resolution following this for the city getting it for the right-of-way. I can answer any questions that you may have for me for Planning Commission purpose of it, or Mr. Johnson probably can do the other side of it.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I'd have to add is that, essentially this is some cleanup. It was treated as if it was public right-of-way for, I don't know how long it's been, like 15 years or so. I forget the dates, but that's how it was treated. It wasn't until recently that this issue was discovered and the taxing issue of it was rediscovered. And really, we felt that if the city was going to be taking some kind of interest in the property, we felt that it was more appropriate to do it this way as opposed to taking ownership of the actual property. This way, it's just going to be dedicated as public right-of-way. We essentially treat it as you would a street. So if there's maintenance or future improvements that would be made in that canal area, you'd have the ability to assess those costs to the adjacent property owners, which you probably wouldn't have that ability had we done, a direct transfer and the city had taken owner of it directly. So I think this kind of is a best of both worlds situation. You're able to preserve all the ability to do those future maintenance and improvement items, and you're also able to ensure that the public retains access and ability to use that for forever.
So basically, you're saying if we take ownership of the property then?
This way, no, we don't take actual ownership of it. We get,
Who would
we
be
get
the
the,
owner?
so just like your other right-of-way, typically the adjacent property owner will own out into the middle of the road. I think in this situation, you've got an individual or an organization that owns this entire plat. So they would probably still be considered the owner of the property for that purposes, but you've got that right-of-way interest that, essentially supersedes that ownership. So if you ever went back and vacated this in the future, I think it would probably revert back to being privately held by that owner. But for the foreseeable future, you're going to treat it just like you would a street.
So if we approve this dredging project and they want that part dredged, would the property owners have to pay for the dredging of that area?
It would be, if there was an improvement that was done in that canal, you would have the ability to assess that to the adjacent property owners.
That's up to the council?
That would be up to the council.
I assume, Justin, that homeowners or lot owners are not allowed to put docks out into that canal.
At this point, I believe that there are a number of covenants in place that would address the placement of those. In general, docks, those are generally governed by the Game Fish and Parks, and we don't have a lot of say in how those are placed, so.
So you're saying they still could be out there? I mean, what does Game Fish and Park say about it?
I think if there weren't the covenants, I think the covenants will be the bigger limiting factor. From my understanding, they're more restrictive than what the Game Fish and Parks would be. I'm not sure what the Game Fish and Parks regulations would allow there, but there would be some restrictions that would apply at that level too.
They wouldn't be able to block the
Yeah, they're
right.
not able to block the canal. The canal still has to be usable.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, motion by
Second.
Mr. Savers, second by Mrs. Charks. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve Resolution R 2023-18, accepting and opening certain dedicated land for public use. Mr. Johnson, you going to
All right. so
reiterate this?
Yeah, this is the same issue again, so I don't have to do the full background, but this is just the resolution accepting that land as public right-of-way and opening it for public use. This will allow us to have it open for that purpose, and it also allows the county to treat it as that right-of-way type land.
Who maintains the retaining walls, Justin, on that?
My understanding is that the retaining walls are currently outside of those property owners' actual parcels, so they would probably be within the area that was just platted. The maintenance of those, I'm not sure if any of the covenants address those. If the covenants do not address those, then it would be the city responsibility to maintain those. And then you'd be back in that situation where if we were doing maintenance, you'd have the ability to assess those costs back to the adjacent property owner.
Okay, further discussion? I guess we need a motion.
And I'd just add, if they do happen to be on private property, then obviously they're the responsibility of the owner.
Second.
Motion by Mr. McCardle, second by Mrs. Charks. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Public hearing on Lake Mitchell improvements. Mr. Schrader, you going to lead us off?
Yes, sir. They're good. So with that, we will start the public hearing for the Lake Mitchell Restoration Project. The City of Mitchell is seeking up to $25 million of funding from the South Dakota Board of Water and Natural Resources for a project that will consist of various components designed to improve the health of Lake Mitchell. The project will include, but is not limited to, drawing down the lake to exposed sediments, thereby facilitating mechanical dredging of soft sediment in the lake and management of impacts of future sediment and nutrient loading from external sources. The funds could be either a grant from the State Consolidated Water Facilities Construction Program or a loan from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund Program. The expected loan term for the Clean Water SRF loan is 3.25% for 30 years, and the Board of Water and Natural Resources may forgive all or a portion of the loan principal. The amount, source of funds, and terms will be determined by the Board of Water and Natural Resources when the application is presented at a scheduled board meeting. This application is due July 1st, and with that, we will open it up to public comment.
I would like to say, if you're going to, don't repeat the same thing over and over, please. If you have feelings that fall along the same line as somebody else, just reiterate what they said. Don't take a lot of time to say the same thing over and over and over.
And just so we know, Bar is still on the line for questions.
Okay, so Bar can be asked questions if you wish. So, anybody wish to speak?
How are you? Look at that, they're leaving. My name's Joe Kippis. I'm with Friends of the Fire Steel. Friends of the Fire Steel is a nonprofit, 501c3. Our purpose is to reclaim the treasured asset, Lake Mitchell and Fire Steel Creek. Specifically, our purpose right now is fundraising. And we have a target of $3 million that we are trying to raise to apply towards the in-lake solution. Currently, we're at $1 million committed. So we've got a good start. But I want to go back to when Friends of the Fire Steel was the Lake Mitchell Advisory Committee. And we were asked to determine why the lake was a difficult place to use in the summertime. And to get the correct answer, we wanted to get some experts in there. So we found a lake expert, and that was FIRA, to help us determine what the problem was. And they knew quickly that it was blue-green algae. And the reason it was getting worse was our phosphorus numbers were growing, and they continue. And then they pointed out that, of course, phosphorus being the food for the blue-green algae, then they pointed out that if you want to make a difference or a correction, you're going to have to improve the quality of water coming into the lake because your creek is supplying 53% of it. And then they also mentioned the other 47% you already have in the lake. So you're going to have to do something with that too. So you have your soft sediment releasing phosphorus, and if you want to lower that number, you've got to remove the soft sediment. So their solution was clear that you needed to do two things. So we found the problem, we came up with a solution, and that's pretty well documented. So then it was how interested is our community? Well, Mitchell developed a roadmap for the future, and it was our Forward 2040 program. And there was a fairly extensive survey done. I think there was 2,500 respondents. And of the respondents, fixing the lake was a top priority. And so I believe there were some other responses that were also high, but that consistently came back as a top response. They also surveyed the high school, and it was interesting because the high school kids, that was their top also. You know, fix the lake. They didn't say work on it, they said fix it, because they've been hearing about it for a long time. So let's get it done. And then we get into the project, and of course, the details are coming up, and now, as you've seen, this fix might be $25 million. And there's some understandable sticker shock that comes with that number. But it was quite a halt, and then there was a response as, well, wait a minute, maybe we should wait and see what happens in the watershed, see what we can do there first, you know, and I guess I have to dispute that, because in none of the solutions presented was it do one, you know, do the watershed, then do this. They said do them both. If your intention is to fix the lake, you have to do them both. If you do half of it, you don't fix it. And so consequently, I think that argument, even though it may sound like it makes sense, it doesn't correct the problem. And so the other thing that's been mentioned, and I've heard it recently, was, well, we've already tried dredging and alum, and neither worked. But I think, you know, tonight was good evidence when Barr was discussing alum. You know, they pointed out that the technology we have now is we can apply it so much more effectively, and it can be so much more useful. If you're going to spend money, you're putting it where you need it. And then, of course, the dredging that we did in the past was for a different purpose. We dredged to add capacity to the lake without really any attention to what it was doing for phosphorus numbers. So, yes, we did dredge, but it was for a different reason. So I think, you know, the past dredging and alum circumstances really don't compare to what we're doing now, you know, with today's technology and what was presented here as far as the dredging program. So tonight we get a chance to do something that will affect future generations, and it can affect our ability to attract people to Mitchell and businesses to Mitchell. So what does this mean for us? What does this vote tonight tell the rest of the state about Mitchell? You know, people are watching. What's Mitchell going to do? They've talked about their lake for a lot of years. Are they going to do something? And to me, it's a good question. Are we excited about the future as we've described in our Forward 2040 plan? Or do we want to sit back and wait and see what happens? You know, I'm hoping we move forward. So if we can't wait, if we choose to wait, the lake will continue to degrade, and the cost to fix the lake will continue to go up. So I'm hoping that our council tonight sees that it's a good time to get busy with this, and let's fix our lake. Thank you.
Okay.
Could you pass these out for me and just send them down? Mayor and members of the council, my name is Mike Valley. I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and also I'm vice chair of the Friends of the Fire Steel. This is a tough vote, guys. I understand that. As a former legislator for 12 years, I know what you're going through. I sat through a lot of those tough decisions. It's not easy. Don't sleep well. I haven't slept well either. I'm not even voting. A former legislator told me at one time, he says, do the right thing. You'll sleep a lot better if you do the right thing. And sometimes that's hard to determine. When we talk about tough votes, sometimes it's about money. Sometimes it's about policy, because we're going to change our policy, and that's tough because we've been doing it this way for a while. Sometimes it's political. Sometimes it's values that we hold deep to our hearts. And then there are those that can be transformative. And that's what your vote today is about. It's transformative. It's transformative to our city, restoring our lake. In the process of doing some research, I talked to some people at Fountain Lake over by Albert Lee. And so then after I got through talking to him, because they're dredging their lake, it's about the same size of ours, probably about a fifth smaller than ours. Then I went to Albert Lee and looked up Fountain Lake. And they're advertising for Fountain Lake, like, please come to our lake. Come fish in the fall, come fish now, come do this, come stay at our campground. They got all that on their website, asking people to come to their lake. But sometimes why this gets difficult is we have a lot of noise out there, a lot of noise going on. I get that when I go to a tavern or whatever, a coffee shop, and I get all this noise. And I'm just going to run through these so that you can kind of hear what that noise is that everybody's hearing. And you try and put that noise out and look at the facts. And one of the things I would go to is our head of Public Works, Joe Schrader, put out a deal called the Restoration of Lake Mitchell. And if you haven't read that, that is just superb. He goes through from the very beginning what has happened and carries it all up to now and what we can do by fixing the lake. He does a great job of chronicalizing it. I'm going to set this up here. I got it right side up. No. So on Sunday, after church, I was going home, and am I still on? Yeah. I still had on a white shirt and pants, and I decided I'm going to go to this is Father's Day. This is when people come out. So I was looking to see what our lake looked like. And these are the pictures that I took of Lake Mitchell. This is what we're saying that people come to us. I mean, this is the public beach, Camp Aurora, Sandy Beach, the West End Bridge, the deck ramp. What was interesting there were two different people putting in their boats, and one of them was from Plankington. And they'd come over, and they had their 3 kids, and they were getting in the lake. And the other one was from Sioux Falls. It was a couple, and they'd come over to spend the day on Lake Mitchell for Father's Day. And then when I went and took the picture, I looked at, man, this is a pea soup they're putting that boat in. And I thought, I wonder what their thought of it is. The first big one I want to talk about, that kind of the elephant in the room, it's right behind Councilman Rice there, and that's the watershed. And Joe had talked about that a little bit, but I don't think a lot of times people understand how big that watershed is. It starts from south of Stickney, goes halfway to Chamberlain at White Lake, goes up north of Wessington Springs, and the bottom of that T is about where Huron's at, and then comes all the way down to Mitchell. And Jeff, if you'll just point to where the lake is there compared to the watershed, that little piece there, it's about as long as his finger, not even as long as his finger, that's Lake Mitchell compared to the watershed. So when we say we want to go out and we're going to clean up that watershed, and in order to make any difference at all, you got to get about 80% of it clean. How many farmers do you think are from Stickney to White Lake to all the way up to north of Wessington Springs and back down to Mitchell, that you're going to have to get to agree to do things to their land? See, we don't own that land. I had some people ask me the other day, well, we own the watershed, don't we? No. They pay taxes on that. That's their land. And a lot of times you'll see the land. Have you ever looked at stuff where land is, and it's got the names of all the people that own that quarter? And then you got about 5 quarters that all have the last name Jones, but it's a brother, a sister, another sister, and the creek just kind of weaves all the way through it, or a tributary to it. And you got to get them all to agree. It isn't just the guy that's farming it. So it's not an easy task. That's what I'm talking about. And Dan and I, we talked about that, and I do believe we should do more into that watershed. And Dan, I'll go with you if you want. We can go out and talk to guys if you want. But understand, this is not an easy it's not a one-time meeting that you go and sign somebody up. You got government programs, you got a lot of things that people have to do. And so put that in your mind when you say, well, we got to fix up the watershed. Somebody says, well, how long is it going to take? A month of Sundays? I says, no, more like a century of Sundays. Because you can imagine how many different owners you have of that land that's in our watershed. The other good part about that is, though, is we can get grants to do things in the watershed. And the other side of it, we can't get grants to do things in our own lake. And we own this. We can make the decision here on this. You're the board of directors of the city, basically, and that's your decision. It's the Mitchell's Lake, and you're the one that can make that decision. But on the watershed, completely different deal. We got to get them to go along with it. Now, some of the other things that come out and are being yelled, one is, I talked about that, just get a grant, take care of it. Well, we've searched for grants. I know the city has. We can get them for the watershed, but not for the lake. Domestic water first. By golly, we got to get our domestic water problem solved first. Great idea. However, the water is in an enterprise fund, as you folks probably all know, and that is in our rate structure on our domestic water. And so that is going to be taken care of by the water rates, if I'm not correct. Is that correct, Mayor? So I'm talking about the noise that gets out there, that you got to straighten this out and look at the real issue. I had one the other day. What if it fails? This has never been done before. This is all new. No, it's not. Well, where has it been done? So that's when I got on the internet and I started looking all the other places that have done similar type deals. And they have reduced that phosphorus that's in the lake that's causing our algae. And they say, oh, well, it's already been dredged. That didn't work. We're doing a mechanical dredge, number one, not a hydraulic dredge, which we had the last time. The last time, I was president of the Chamber of Commerce when that came up. And what we needed then, we weren't trying to get the phosphorus out of the lake. We were digging a bigger hole. We were running out of water. We needed a bigger hole, and that's what we did. And one of the things we'll have to do when we do this one is you got to watch who's doing the dredging. Watch, make sure it's done right. Because that guy, we had made a deal with the fishermen, and that was that they would dredge around in circles on the cattails, not take them all out. Now, he got in there and plowed all the way through them. Took out a lot of the cattails, which didn't do us any good. So that's another thing that's the moist. The zebra mussels. Oh, that's gonna take care of our problem. Well, if you know anything about zebra mussels, most mussels like to go into the dirt or into the muck. Zebra mussels don't. They got to get on something hard. So they're on the rocks. They're on the sand bottoms, dirt bottoms. And what do they like? They like the green algae. You know why? Because the green algae is part of the life cycle of a lake. The blue algae is what's the problem. That's the problem. That can make people sick. That can kill livestock and dogs and be really tough on children. It can also irritate skin. So that's what we got to get rid of. What about the zebra mussel? Nah, he doesn't like it either. They even had a picture on YouTube at one time that showed the zebra mussel spitting out the blue-green algae. He just wanted the green. And what have they found in lakes that had the zebra mussels? They eat all the green algae, and what does the blue-green then do? It expands because it doesn't have competition. And then another one of the noises, well, what are we going to do about POET? And as I read in the plan here, POET, we're looking at providing them domestic water, and they're also looking at doing some other way of getting water because our water isn't to the standards that they need. They're really having to work to make it useful for their place. And as I understand it, there's going to be water, at the east end that they can use for the golf course and for the ball field. So that's another part of the noise. So I'm saying put that noise away. And then I want to talk about the stars being aligned. I'm going to put on a different hat now. I'm on the State Transportation Commission. And we're going to take the road from the bypass to the airport, and we're going to put that all in new bridges, 2 new bridges. And the greatest part for the lake is we're going to put in a shared use path. And I disdain shared use paths that use the shoulder of the road in an urban area. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put that across the top of the berm of the lake, so you got a view of the lake, and then they're going to put a bridge, a walk bridge over the top of the spillway and continue that all the way up to the airport road. Another thing the state's going to do is, I don't know if you've walked down there along that bike path that's right down on the bottom on the north side of the lake. You look down there and the only thing, the rocks have been pulled away by the ice, and all those roots are down there, and the trees are dying, and it's creating a cavern in there. The state has got to protect its road and its bridge. We're going to go in there with riprap. We'll re-riprap that part of the berm. So I'm talking about the things that are out there. The timing is right. We're looking at the jetty, and how do we build that jetty? We dig a hole in the park that we've got out there. We take that, put it in, make a jetty so that people can bring their boats out and put them in a dock. And then secondly, we'll take the sludge out of the bottom of the lake, put it into that hole, and build a mound out of it, and got a sledding hill. And we got a grant to help put in that jetty and the docks. And we got SRF funds, availability. We got a drawdown in this process, and that'll be good because the zebras, see, they can't live out of water for over 5 days. So that'll help with our zebra problem. And we'll get it down below the rocks. The Kelly property. That's the only thing we do own in the watershed. And that goes to bid July 10th, is that right, Joe? July 10th?
Yep, bids will be open on July 10th.
Bids will be open on July 10th. There's 37 acres, I think, around just short of 40 acres, if I remember right. You got the Friends of the Fire Steel that are going to raise $1 million. As Joe just said, we just went over, just a shade over $1 million, and we haven't gone out public yet. We're just talking to some people, and they've been very generous. They said, oh, we're glad somebody is working on this. So my point is, the stars are aligned. And as the old saying goes, you better hit the iron when it's hot. And that's what we need to do. And I'm going to close with something that I debated about not saying. It's a friend of mine has a little sign on his desk. You know how we all have those little signs that give us a little inspiration to do certain things? And I looked at that. I thought, is this apropos or not? And here's how it goes. I think it was done during the railroading days. It goes, even if you're on the right track, which I feel we are, we've done all the background studies, we've done everything, and we've had 4 or 5 studies that have said the same thing. Even if you're on the right track, you'll get run over if you just sit there. And I thought about that. And thought, no, I don't want to mention that. It sounds like I'm lecturing or whatever. And I thought, but is there some truth in that? I mean, how often does that happen to us in our own lives? You know, we're on the right track, but if you just sit there and the opportunity passes you by, you go, daggum, I missed that, didn't I? So it's time to make the move. Put the noise aside, and as the people said, the number one issue when they were asked to comment was fix the lake. And the number 3 thing that they said was the worst mistake the city could make was to not fix the lake. That was number 3. But the number 1 thing to do was fix the lake. And this was not a multiple choice question. This was an open-end question. What's the most important thing you should do? I hope you can get her done tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's John Clark. I'm not with the Friends of the Fire Steel District. I'm not, don't live on the lake, but I've lived here in Mitchell for 40 plus years. Our family has enjoyed the lake immensely, swimming, fishing, boating, and we're lucky as a community to have a lake this close for us all to enjoy. This lake is now, I understand, 93 years old, and it needs some help, needs to be repaired. We've got that continued use for 93 years. It's time to reinvest in our lake. You know, we ask companies to come here. I've been on economic development before and invest in our community. We want people to move here and invest in our community. We want us to invest in our community. We want the city to invest to fix the lake. We now have an opportunity to solve this problem. The voters have voted in favor of selling lots that can go into a fund to help fix the lake. We have the Friends of the Fire still raising money, and I've made my pledge for a six-figure gift. We have funds to fix the lake. We must not miss this opportunity to fix the lake. I know as a business person, opportunities sometimes arise. If you don't take it when it's there, it's not going to be there again. If we don't do nothing, this lake will not improve by itself, and it will continue to go downhill. We need to work together to find innovative ways to pay for this. Maybe we can plot more lots around the lake and sell them and apply that money to fix the lake. Maybe we can TIF the area around the lake and have those increase in value to fix the lake. I want my community to be a can-do instead of we can't do that. So let's work together and let's fix the lake. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Justin Luther. I am with the Friends of Fire Steel as well as here on my own behalf. I agree with a lot of what's been said, and I won't go over it again. As a business owner in town, we go out and we're trying to recruit. We're trying to always get better our community, and what in the last 5 years I've heard more in interviews, give me quality of life. It's not about the money, it's not about necessarily the job, but I want quality of life for me and my family. I want things to do. As I sit around and watch the towns around us grow, add things to their communities, and I see where we're at in Mitchell today from where I came here 15 years ago, I think we're behind. And that scares me as a business owner, it scares me as a father, it scares me as a resident of Mitchell. When I look at what we have here is an asset, and as a business owner, the city should be acting just like a business owner. At the end of the day, if we don't reinvest in our assets, we won't be relevant 5 years from now. We can't sit as a business owner and not add paint to the walls, add a new item, do things and expect that good things are going to happen. Things aren't just going to come. People aren't just going to come. You have to give them a reason to come. We have that ability in this lake, and it is one of our most prized assets, in my opinion. $25 million is a lot of money. Mitchell will never be a community that has $20 million, $25 million, $30 million sitting in the bank. So no matter what we do, we're going to have to finance. No matter what big project we have, we're going to have to finance it. And I think 3.2% is a reasonable rate. And what I do know, I was in the construction business before being here, it doesn't go down. Costs do not go down. And at the end of the day, I would ask the council, I would ask the city, what big project on the horizon is more important than fixing the lake? So where are we going to put that $25 million if we're not going to put it into what I feel is what could be an attraction to Mitchell instead of a deterrent? I go out in other communities and it's constantly asked, lake, and that's all that's talked about, and it's embarrassing. So I guess what it tells me, if I'm trying to recruit people to Mitchell, what does it say about Mitchell and our city when we let an asset like this go to what it is? To me, the city of Mitchell has a nuisance property. We wouldn't let the Corn Palace look like this. We wouldn't let the pool look like this. We wouldn't let any of our parks look like this. But we're going to sit here and continue to allow the lake look, smell, and be the image of our community. If not now, when? This is our opportunity, and I truly feel if it doesn't happen now, it won't happen in my lifetime, maybe not my kid's lifetime. So I'm begging you, do something. It's my understanding that even if we request the funds, and maybe I'm wrong, Stephanie, if we request the funds and we go out to bid and it comes in at $40 million, it doesn't mean we have to take those funds. Am I correct?
That is true. We have the right to reject any and all bids.
So what is the harm in going out and getting this and getting the ball rolling and seeing what it comes in at. Maybe it comes in at $22 million. You never know until you bid something. But at the end of the day, to sit and do nothing is not acceptable, in my opinion, as a business owner, as a person in the community that wants to see Mitchell grow. To do nothing is wrong, in my opinion. I appreciate all your time, and I know it's not an easy decision, but thanks for at least considering getting moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Council, my name is Doug Greenway with Mount Mitchell Township. We've been a lake user for at least 25 years. The last 5, we have, not only have our kids moved out of town, but the water quality is first. My wife and I, we love the water, so we actually go down to the river now and boat. So there's 2 things that I want to mention. I'd like to encourage all council members to vote in favor of the loan to improve the lake. The first is, as a farm kid, we had dugouts, and you're all familiar with those. And every 25 or 30 years, you had to bring the big diggers out, scoop out all the crud, that black, stinky, rotten stuff, and dump it off to the side. And just like that, the water cleared up, the greenery improved around the edges, and the animals were able to drink fresh water. This lake is no different. I mean, it's 100 years old in a few years, and it's never been dug out. So just think of all the stuff that comes in, goes up against the spillway, and just sits there and sits in the bottom. So you know all the studies have shown that, and it's gone almost 100 years like this. So let's say we went back 15 years and cleaned it out, because the last 15, certainly farming practices, if not 20, everything is micronutrients on the farm. Councilman Allen mentioned micronutrients and precision-guided application. Every farmer in the watershed is using precision application, fertilizers, insecticides, and manures, or they're not in business anymore. So that never happened the last 85 years, that lake, and it still lasted this long. So I think if we were to scoop it out, get it back to the way it started, just think, can we get 150, maybe 200 years out of this lake the next time? It's certainly not unreasonable to think that way, because less of that crud is coming in from the farm ground. They're just not farming that like they did in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, and 60s. Second thing I want to say to encourage you to vote yes on the loan. I'm very fortunate. We have 2 of our 3 sons moving back to Mitchell, and their wives. And they love recreation. They bike, they hike, they kayak, they fish, and they are very much looking forward to having a clean lake. I know for one, we would certainly move back here. We were on the lake on Sunday, and it was a great fun. But I know by the end of July, it stains the boat. The water smells. You go to put in, and you have to scoop the crud out of the way so that your motor won't suck up crud and clog the vent on it. So we want to move back here. Our kids are moving back here, and we want them to have families here and enjoy this lake for the next 100 years or 200. So I'd encourage you to vote yes on the loan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just real quickly, I'm not going to reiterate everything like Bob requested. We've heard it all before. I'm Brian Temple. I'm on the Friends of the Fire Steel Committee, and I've lived on Lake Mitchell since 1991. And I can attest that in the last 30 years, 30 years ago, you could go out to the lake, you could enjoy the lake, and you could plan on a pretty clear day. I can't say that the last few years. You cannot really make a plan to go out the lake and be assured that you're going to be able to get on it and use it. It has deteriorated, and I think anybody that's been around Mitchell has witnessed that. So does it need to be done? Yes. We've talked about it for 7 years, ever since we had FIRA come to town and tell us about it, and it's been discussed and discussed. I think we spent about $1 million in getting these proposals, and I think it's time to act now. Is it necessary? I think we've demonstrated that. The deterioration of the water quality, is it important? Forward 2040 survey, #1 issue. Is it expensive? Yes, it's going to be expensive, and I think we all realize it's not going to go down. It's not going to get less expensive. Now's the time to act. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else want to speak? Okay.
With that, if there,
Maybe I
I guess,
should-
oh,
Okay, go
yep,
ahead.
go ahead.
Everybody's waiting for my vote anyway, so I'll go ahead, because
This is just a public hearing.
I know, but I'm just going to explain why I'm going to do what I'm going to do. Probably the last 10 days, I probably talked to 50, 60, 70, 80 people that have called, emailed, text, whatever. People I've known for 20, 30, 40, 50 plus years, in favor, not in favor of the lake. And personally, you know, I think the lake's an asset to the town, but I can't see myself putting us in that financial difficulty for the next 30 years. Because I don't feel, my gut feeling is, I don't think that we can afford the next 30 years to pay close to $2 million a year. I think if we want it done, it should be put on a ballot, let the whole town decide it, instead of just a couple people. So I'll be voting no.
Anybody else wish to speak? Okay. You want to say
I might
something?
say a couple words.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, Kevin, you bring up a good point of, you know, if this could be a public vote, you know, then we know once and for all, is the community going to support this or not? And we do know if tonight we go forward and we give enough yes votes that it will move forward, as every vote we have, obviously it can be referred. So first of all, there's just an extra step that has to happen to get signatures, and then at that point, it can be referred, and we would have a public vote. But without a yes vote tonight, I guess we may never know where the community is at with this. And then the second thing, and maybe third, is I would like to have, after I'm done, Joe discuss the fact of there is some opportunities that are starting out there for grants in the in-lake. That grant application will never be filed because the city council doesn't support it. So that is a possibility of money that we would be able to apply, and it sounds like it's a very good opportunity. The second thing is Friends of Fire Steel are out there just within their own little confines and relay tonight that with the council's vote, there's the possibility of going out and then raising money, but the city has to take the first step of showing a commitment. And as was brought out, if we move forward with this and do the drawdown, it will help obviously upstream. And then the other thing that comes through is then you get the design in place. So yeah, you will have to expend some money there. But then at that point in time, it is ultimately the council's decision is, are we going to move forward with this design? If they say no, you always have that design on the shelf until it may make some economic sense. But if we don't have that, we'll never know what it's cost, we never know how much we're going to raise, and we never know how much we're going to lose in grants.
You're right. Tonight, you did approve under consent agenda a grant that is being submitted for $5 million to work in the lake. Will we get it? We don't know, but if this goes down, it won't get submitted, so. Sure.
Yep, I did apply for a Bureau of Reclamation Smart Water grant. We requested $5 million. You could have requested up to 65%, we requested 20, just to make it a competitive as we could be. We would know about this roughly within 6 months if we receive the grant or not. This is a first-time grant through the Bureau of Reclamation, so we're not quite sure how many people will apply. So we're optimistic, you know, but with any grant, you go in assuming you're not going to receive it, hoping you do. Along the lines of another grant, Game Fish and Parks has urged us to apply for a grant if we do move forward with this project. If we don't, we probably won't apply.
Yeah, Kevin, if you could just see your way to vote, to just give us the opportunity. You know, it's not locking us into place. It's not, all it does is your vote is going to allow us to take it to the next step, take the next step. I was thinking as I was campaigning, there were a lot of people that I would talk to who would say, I'm not in favor of selling lots on the lake, but I am in favor of dredging. And that initiative passed by, 56% of the voters said that we want to sell those lots on the lake, which tells me that at minimum, 56% of the voters in our community are in favor of dredging. And I know that there are more because I know that there are people who didn't want to sell the lots who still were in favor of dredging. And I don't know, I mean, I feel like our community has spoken loud and clear over and over and over and told us exactly what they want us to do. And I don't know what our job is here if it's not to find a way to make their priorities our priorities. They're the ones who elected us, and they're the ones who are putting their faith in us to, do what we can to improve our community. And in their minds, improving our community includes fixing that lake. This year, I think, is a perfect example because there's a drought. We know right now there's not a lot of water coming in from the watershed. And here we are in June, and at this point, we already are having algae blooms. We are having some fish kill, and it's not because of what's coming in from the watershed. It's all from what is in the lake. And so I just feel like if we, I had someone say to me today, it was today, I don't know, I've talked to a lot of people too, but I think it was just today that they said, if this doesn't pass, then there's no reason for us to live on the lake or, have, to even invest in this community in the way we have. I mean, why would we do that if we're not even going to take care of this, this most priceless asset that we have? It's one of the things, it's the flagship of our community besides the Corn Palace, but all of the pictures of our community show this beautiful lake. And to do nothing tonight or to not let us at least take the next step is, I think, so short-sighted. And I think it's a terrible insult to the people of our community who have begged us, not just the people who are of the Friends of the Fire Still, not just the people who live on the lake, but across the community, they came out and said, we want to see you clean up this lake. And at least for me, I call that as a battle cry. That's like, we have to do this. This is important to the people of our community. And I think that if you'll just give us that opportunity to just take the next step, like Jeff said, it's not locking us in. It's not making it so that this can't be referred, because it can be. And, I would welcome that. I feel like if it was referred, then the community really will have an opportunity to express their vote. But if we don't pass this tonight, if we don't even give us the opportunity to make that a possibility, then your opportunity to have a public vote is dead in the water. No pun intended, so.
I did have a lot of people approach me on the sale of lots, and their opinion was the large percentage that voted to sell the lots shows that there's a lot of support. Council should listen to those people. So ultimately, it's your decision. I don't get to vote, so.
Bob, just a couple more quick things too on it. We've all heard, arguments for and against, and one of them that why I brought the comment up tonight and asked Barr, what steps should we be taking? Should we work on one? Should we work on the other one? Or should we work on both? And the comment is, you do have to do both at the same time. And as far as waiting, the argument for waiting for upstream, which we are making advances and we're going to continue to do that, but for waiting upstream, if we're going to wait till it is completed and done, you could be looking, pick a number, 50, 75, 800 years, whatever it is. It's not going to be 10 and it's not going to be 25, but it's going to be a century before you get that.
Just doing
completed.
some quick math, if you were able to buy 100 feet each side of the creek, in that watershed, you're spending between 15 and 20 million just to get the land, if you could get it for $7,500 an acre. And you haven't even done anything. You still have to fence it off. You still have to do whatever wetlands you're going to do in there. So you think the lake's expensive. That's out of reach.
Yeah, and that is a good follow-up with my other comment I was going to make is, financially it is. We've talked about it, and it's a very large undertaking. I'm assuming most of us have purchased a house somewhere along the line, and most probably did a 30-year mortgage. Already you're in that business, and in order to afford it, you do have to stretch it out. And I did ask the question to Stephanie, and we do have the ability to pay loans back quicker if we do get the money, quicker than the 30-year. But keep in mind, in today's interest rates, with a $100,000 house, and today's mortgage on a 30-year mortgage is 5.75%. If you would let that loan and make the payment for the next the next 30 years on that, the amount of interest you would pay is $110,000, and that's acceptable to individuals because they know that they can budget, they'll have it in place, they'll have an asset in the end that's worth something. But if you just say, there's no way I'm going to, if you focus and just hone in on the $110,000, it'd scare you. But in reality, it's the monthly payment you're going to have to make in order to get to a point where you've got this asset. At today's rate, as Justin brought up, is historically low at 3.25%. Rates are rising. Everybody sees it around us. It's going to cost more to do the lake, and it's going to cost for construction and dredging wise, and it's going to cost more with the interest. So I hope there's at least 5 people here that are just let it go to the next level. Look at the time and effort and the money that we've put in up to this point. And how in the world can we say right now is let's just stall and not do it? Let's take that next step and see. Again, the council is going to have the ultimate decision when it comes down to the bid.
Jeff, I just want to echo some of your words. Obviously, some of the concern I have is obviously the momentum that we have going. We have a huge momentum going from so many different entities that are taking place, from obviously local to city to state to all the way up to the federal. It just that momentum is on its way, and I just like to see us continue with it. Obviously, I had the pleasure of being born and raised at Lake Mitchell, and still have a pleasure of being part of it. And back years ago, obviously, we'd swim around in our nice clean lake, and I see some of the gentlemen out there that live at the lake yet today, and they were there longer than I am. Joe Carl, sort of picking on you, so you're a little older than me. But the fact is, we remember those days when the lake was nice and clean, and now I had the pleasure to swim in the lake on Sunday again by choice. Some people choose not to do it, but my family does swim in that thing every day. And obviously, when we came out, we were a little green, there's no doubt about it. Once again, by choice. But once again, my point of the thing is that the momentum we have going to make this thing go to that next level and actually see it through. If we say no tonight, everything that has happened is absolutely 100% in my mind over. The topic is dead and our lake is dead.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe. I was asked the question earlier this week, if we don't do the project, what does our lake look like moving forward? There's been multiple reports that, consider our lake eutrophic to hyper-eutrophic. And I've asked BAR to prepare a response to that question. So Eric, if you wouldn't mind unmuting and commenting to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll allow Greg Wilson on as well if he wants to comment. Do I have the ability to share my screen, Joe, or no?
I'm trying to see. I think I still have you guys somewhere. Hold on. Oh, there he is. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to pull up, Greg can speak more than I can to degrees of eutrophication. I thought I would just share a slide that I had, I think it was 2 presentations ago in early April, that we were looking at the level of phosphorus in the lake on the bottom left here in the kind of 90s, and then on the right-hand side in the past 5 or 6 years. And you can see this is total phosphorus concentration on the y-axis, years on the x. These are on the same scale, but you can tell how much the lake has degraded in the past several decades. And this isn't even to imply that nothing has been done during that time, which I think was the specific question. If we do nothing, people have been working at it, but not maybe to the level that we're talking about now. So, that's the one slide that I wanted to show, and then the second, kind of honing in on the upper left, or excuse me, the left-hand side of this one, was just looking at phosphorus concentrations, again, on the left-hand side in parts per billion total phosphorus measured in the watershed. They've continued to increase as well. So I don't see a reason why you would expect that trend, the increasing levels of phosphorus, decreasing quality of the lake water. I don't know why you could expect that trend to change, I suppose. Does that get at your question, Joe?
I believe so. Are there any follow-up questions from council? Eric can answer your question.
Can you go back to the next slide that you showed us with from the watershed? Can you explain that just a little? I guess I didn't understand what your point was about this, that the watershed loading has continued.
Yeah.
Like, just that basically is your point that we need to do both?
The point is we need to do both. That's correct. Yep. You're right. The point is we need to do both. The right-hand side, this is getting very detailed and requires more context, but, we can identify when things are the worst, when the incoming load is the worst, and that's during either, very high or very low conditions. So we had talked about how we could target maybe more of the lower hanging fruits on things. But yeah, the point of this was just that the load coming in continues to be significant, and then the observations that were shared earlier about there being very low flow coming in at this current time during the drought conditions, but there still being water quality degradation highlights that point as well. But that's the internal load contribution.
Okay. I've said since I was elected and kind of took this project on that it's a system, it's an ecosystem. You have to do both. You can't do one or the other. And we're working, we're doing the best we can in the watershed, but without some major cash or some big player coming forward and say, hey, you put a new big dam on our property, which isn't going to happen because right now crop prices are as high as they've probably ever been. We're just going to struggle with getting stuff done in the watershed to any great extent. We're going to have 30-some acres of wetland created here within the next year, and that will start helping. We are going to look at other options, some of them being floating wetlands out in the creek. So we're doing stuff in the watershed. But you still have the lake, and you can see what has happened this summer already with the warm weather. So
But the watershed is still impaired, Bob, right?
it is. Yeah, and it will be. It always will be.
When you get the soil profile full, you get everything full, and you get a 4 or 5 inch rain's not uncommon, and here it comes. It's the soft sediment. And I've had growers tell me in the last 4 days, there's soft sediment in the fire still. Watch out, because it's coming your way once we get this all filled. So we're back.
And that's why we're putting sediment traps in the wetland. There'll be 3 of them. And that's why we have to have a drawdown to take that out and maintain those. So we are doing what it needs to be done to prevent that sediment from getting to the lake. Will it all be prevented? No. You'll never prevent all of it.
That's why we're using alum to treat it.
And if you think, well, that's to prevent or to treat the stuff in the lake. And what will increase that is if you get more sediment building on top of that alum. That's what the chemist just told us, Dan. So, the idea here is the wetlands to prevent it, and we're doing that. And we're going forward with 3 sediment traps, maybe a 4th if we can work it out. That's part of the 25 million. You're only 13 million in the dredge. You're 4 million in contingency, you're 3.5 million for a drawdown. It's the whole package you're looking at here for the lake. So, and you have the ultimate decision once bids come in to say, we're not going to do that. But if you don't get a price, you will not know what's going on or what it's going to take. And I can tell you this much, we've already lost $350,000 a year in buying power waiting this long to do this over the last 2 years. And interest rates are not going down.
So I've got some thoughts on the affordability concept. And it's 3 meetings ago, maybe, when the meeting was done, I visited with Joe Schroeder about how much I thought it might cost, and we were in the $30 million range, and then ran some numbers, and I'm looking at, okay, about $100,000 a month. 1.2 million a year, 36 million over 30 years. And we're pretty close to that, of what it would take to pay back. So then I look, okay, how much, and we're saying it's all from general fund. So how much growth do I need in order to get $100,000 a month? And I look at, if I could get 100 jobs at the state median pay scale and infuse that into Mitchell, that $4.5 million, approximately $5 million, will generate me $100,000 a month. So in the next 3 or 4 years, can I have that growth? I looked at the growth of our first and second penny sales tax over the last 14 years, and it's very much up and down, but it's up a couple % per year average, but there's years where it goes down. So I'm looking, well, we should be able to, as a council and future councils, and I've had that question, oh, you can't commit future councils to this disaster, is what a comment was given to me. But at 100 jobs in a year, and how about 100 jobs over 3 years? So maybe 33 per year, new jobs. And that's only at 48, I think the state median 48,000 or something like that. But that's not counting a spouse or a family or a second job. We could gain that 100,000 a month or 1.2 million per year and have that payment. So then I look, well, okay, what other things are we doing out of general fund? And the obvious one to me is parks coming in at about $3 million a year. And it's plus or minus a little bit of that. And there's some usage numbers that are in that, but it's about $3 million a year. And $3 million a year over 30 years and just at a 2% rate or a 2% increase. So the future value of that $3 million over that 30 years is we're going to spend $127 million a year or $127 million in those 30 years just to maintain the current parks that we have. Not make any new parks, not do anything to them, not update them, not do anything other than just maintain them. So if I look at $127 million over 30 years for the parks, and I can't spend $25 or $30 million for the lake, to me, which is the biggest park we have, to me, we're not thinking right. And a future council, we're looking at taking that out of general fund and not trying to raise mill levies. To me, that's an easy decision to make.
I'm looking at the numbers that we've been given now, and $1.8 million a year will strap the next 30 years of council for forever, the way I see it. And I don't want to put the people, the community, in that debt. I'm looking at the numbers that we have that Stephanie gave us last week. 1.8 million for the next 30 years is a lot of money, and the future councils, there's no sense to having a council because nobody will be able to do anything, the way I see it.
Kevin, are you willing to just let us go to the next step so that we can at least explore what lies ahead, explore the opportunity for grants?
I'm going to vote no.
Stephanie, can you bring those numbers back up, possibly?
Which numbers would you like to see?
That presentation that you gave.
Again,
A week
I guess,
ago.
just so it's not misquoted or, taken wrong, this is just kind of a conservative estimate. There was numbers talked about today that would be higher than what we showed here. For example, we were only plugging in $1 million from Friends of Fire Sale. A lot of these are variables that, we can't predict at this point.
But they're conservative, right?
Conservative, yeah, because that's how we tend to do everything when we budget. We want to make sure that whatever we're showing, we're going to be able to hit. So there's always the opportunity that there's other things in there that we're not factoring in. I guess what I originally discussed with council was that we have a kind of a major debt service payment that comes off in 2033. We won't have that anymore. That was our community project bonds that we've been paying out of the general fund. We had 2 different series issued. The total payment has been that amount throughout the life of both those bonds combined. But when that comes off, it's really making that a much more affordable situation. So my first proposal was using some of the designated general fund, future capital projects that we have designated in the general fund to help with those debt service payments in the first couple of years till that comes off. We're earning good interest on that, so instead of paying it all down right up front, we would use that to make the payments for the first couple of years. I guess I can go through here. Do you want me to walk through everything I did at the work session, or how far do you want me to go, Jeff?
No, I just kind of wanted to, I'm sorry, I just wanted to just kind of show what actually is the obligation in the first few years versus the last few years. And I guess, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you wouldn't have made this type of a presentation if you didn't think the city had the ability to move forward financially.
I think that's going to be a council decision, not mine. I think it is. Do I think you can, you have other projects that you have added in after the budget's been approved that have been $300,000 to $600,000 that you have found a way to fund. Does that mean you take on another, I feel like I'm repeating last Monday, so I apologize, but does that mean you take on another $20 million debt service project? No, because our debt capacity, we're only going to have $9 million left in that anyways. Do we know what the growth is going to be in the next 5 years? The last 3 years, we've had really good sales tax growth. And when I've done our budget, we haven't increased our revenue budget to be what the sales tax collections have been. Because prior to that, and I can pull that up if you want, but prior to that, our history was going backwards a little bit. So we have some revenue that's coming in above budget that we're not anticipating because we took a conservative view on our budget. So we'd probably increase our projected revenue closer to what the last 3 years have been. We talk about this all the time. We went up, roughly, so estimated, it's like $820,000 a year from our remote sales tax. We've never put that into the budget because it's just kind of, we've done an incrementally increased revenue projection. So I think that if council says you need to fund it, it's the first thing that goes in before other things. So this project comes before other obligations, and then council takes what's left, and you determine what capital projects you want to do with what's left. Just like we do every year. Sometimes we put priorities into the budget, and council says, nope, that's not going to be the priority, this is the priority, and that's your role as elected officials to decide that. So if council says we're moving forward with this, it's going to be paid. It's just other, what else might be a want, might be something that waits 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road. It might also be something that we save up cash to do and put some time into it. You guys have went from a fund balance, general fund unobligated balance that was at 11%, and we built it above our goal. And that's taken us, 7 years to do by the conservative budgeting? So you got to remember the answer you're going to get from me is always going to be conservative. But you have the ability to do what you guys need to do. You just need to give direction to staff on what your priority is.
Okay.
That's a non-answer.
I always say this is my final comment, I always hop in, but if we look at, and Jerry Beck's out here too, and she's got a very good slide and presentation on the city of Mitchell. And keep in mind, we're sitting on an interstate. We have a great school system. We have the Corn Palace. We've got great employers. But if we don't reinvest into our city, we're going to continue to be stagnant. We have not increased anything theoretically for the last 25, 30 years. In fact, Huron's going to bypass us. Hope nobody from Huron's listening tonight. But Huron's going to bypass us. Yankton's going to bypass us. Yankton sits in the middle of nowhere. and they're right on our heels. And again, if we're not going to invest into the city, people are going to take a look at this and say, thanks, but no thanks, I'm moving on.
Okay, other comments? Are we ready to close public hearing portion? All right, Mr. Schrader, you go.
If there is no one else from the crowd, we will close. There's more, yeah.
I'll just throw in a couple things that weren't mentioned, and I thought someone would. The parts per billion are 780 right now. That's as high as it's ever been this time of the year. 780 parts per billion. Last year was 490 at this time. We had an option, the council did, and the city did. How many years ago was it when we redid the lake or the spillway? And we could have, for about $65,000, put a drawdown in. We didn't do it. We waited. You know what that is today? It's around $3 million. Am I close?
3.5 million is what it is today. 3.5 million.
3.5. Well, I was off a $500,000. And we could have done it for $65,000. If you think that this is going to get any less costly, then you're going to have to think again. And I look at it, if I was a businessman coming here, I'm a calculated risk taker. But if I look at a community and they have an asset that everywhere I go, people ask me, how's your lake coming? What are you doing? And I come into this community and I see you just let it go to pot, I'm going to go, is this where I want to put my business? And I think that's what's important. You have to spend money to make money, and I just want to urge you to think about what you're doing for the future of this community. There were people 97 years ago that decided, we're going to fix this. We're going to make sure Mitchell keeps going. And we need to do that now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Can I add to my earlier response? I think I kind of feel a little bit put on the spot, but I want to make sure I answer this. When I first put together this spreadsheet, I really didn't think there would be a problem for the city to put in an extra $500,000 a year from general funds. So that's why I plugged that one in right away up top. You'll see that the other general fund contributions didn't start till 2032 because that was closer to when that other debt service payment was going to pay off. So when you asked me if I was comfortable with this was the most comfortable proposal that I had because we were using some cash to kind of make those debt service payments for the first couple of years so that if something else comes up, you know, we still had the ability to fund it out of our operating cash. That's probably a better answer. This, to me, felt like more conservative approach just because we can put $500,000 into general fund and that shouldn't be an issue for us in our current budget. And that gives us a period of time to either put some more additional money away or wait until that other debt service payment pays off before we start additional general fund payments. The other one makes me a little bit more nervous if you pay all your cash down up front because now if something comes up that you're not prepared for, if a fire truck goes down and we have to spend $275,000 to replace it, or $500,000, it's probably $750 now, I don't know. It's probably more than that. Too bad Dan's not here. I just feel a little bit better because we can handle those issues that come up between now and when that other debt service payment pays off. Is that a better answer? Okay.
Okay. Anybody else want to speak to this before we close it? Okay. Mr. Schrader, you want to take over?
All right, so I think everybody knows what we're here for, but I'll walk us through it again. Resolution 23-42 authorizes City Council to approve and execute a state revolving financing loan through the South Dakota Board of Water and Natural Resources. The resolution also designates the mayor to execute and submit the application on behalf of the city and to certify and sign payment requests in the event financial assistance is awarded for the project. The application for financial assistance is an amount not to exceed $25 million. Loan term is 30 years at a rate of 3.25%. And staff recommends approval of the resolution. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have about the project. And again, Barr is on the phone for any questions you may have.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion. Motion by Mr. Barrington. Second by Mr. Rice. Okay, further discussion. I will point out that this is an expenditure and appropriation, so the mayor does not get to vote on this. This is strictly a city council situation, so I will not be breaking any ties tonight for anybody that's wondering about that. I don't get that vote, so.
I've got a question on that. I think every vote that comes across council somehow reflects budget or finances.
Well, we're going to.
And let me finish real quickly. We had a 4-4 vote on the Corn Palace about 10 years ago. The mayor broke the tie.
Probably shouldn't have.
And the indoor pool as well.
I think the money was already allocated for those.
We researched this pretty extensively because I thought I was going to be able to break the tie. And Mr. Johnson went through the South Dakota codified law, and I am not allowed to vote on this. And anytime there's an expenditure or an appropriation, the mayor should not be voting on it.
You can veto the decision.
I can veto your decision, yes.
Regardless of what it is?
No.
Well, I'm just going to make a final plea because I know that there are 4 of you sitting around this table who, sorry, I feel so passionately about this and I've just been like sick about it all day, just so worried about tonight. And I just am pleading with you. There are 4 of you I know that who are in a position to help us at least take this to the next level. And, you know, this isn't your last opportunity to vote no. I mean, you can still vote no to a bid. You can, it can still be referred. But I am begging you to just give us the opportunity to take it to the next step. It doesn't have to be Kevin's vote. It can be any of the rest of you who are leaning the other direction to just give us the opportunity to just take it, to see what we can do. And, you know, we all know Stephanie. She's like the most conservative person ever. And I mean, that she's my litmus test. She's like, if it's something, if it's a project that I'm wondering about, I'm like, you know, if Stephanie says it's possible, then I know it's really possible because she wouldn't tell me it was possible if it wasn't, because she's just that kind of a financier. And I love that about her. I think that our city's in a much better financial situation because of her wisdom and her ability to keep us like on a conservative level and fiscally responsible. And I think we're blessed to have her. But if she tells us this is feasible and that we can make this happen and it is something that can be done. And I can't think of a more important project because it's literally, I mean, it's a physical part of our community that if it dies, I mean, it's right there. I mean, what do you do with a giant lake that's dead? I mean, what's the next step? I mean, what do you do with it? I'm like, how do we handle a dead lake in the middle of our beautiful town? I just hope that one of you will just see it in your heart to let us take it just the next step. Please.
What's the magic date of July 1st again?
That is just the application for the SRF loan. If it goes past the July 1st deadline, it just becomes a new application for the next deadline.
Right.
Which I believe is quarterly.
So October.
We're just trying to get it in the soonest application process that we can. You know, I've got a lot of, no secret on this, I've got a lot of time and effort into this, so you're likely not going to get rid of me that easily if you don't allow this to go through, but I have to step back and rethink what I'm doing.
What was the other what was the $5 million in-lake grant though? Was that a July 1st also?
That deadline was June 1st.
Oh, we missed it? Or
No,
not?
we're
I applied
in.
for it.
Oh, we're applying for it, but if we vote it down tonight, we're out of the running.
If you did not approve it tonight, I would have called them and yanked the
And yank it
application.
out, yeah, okay, all right. Well, the only other thought I had is we've learned a lot of information, and we've talked about a lot of information tonight, probably too much, I mean, for one night. I mean, do we want to let this thing, and I know Danny's going to be at the next meeting and be up front, but do we want to let this thing ride for 2 weeks and get a little more information and input from the community?
You know, you've gotten 7 years of information.
I know it, Mayor.
So, it's time to, pardon my French, crap or get off the pot. So you need to make a decision and quit kicking this can down the road. So if your decision is you're not going to do it, I guess that
So if,
disappoints me greatly, but we'll move on.
okay, so if the vote is no, then what? Then what?
Well, then tomorrow I will well, not tomorrow, but Monday, because I'm going on vacation tomorrow. When I come back Monday, I'll step back and rethink what's going on and try to figure this thing out another way. But it unravels a lot of the funding we've already got in place.
I mean, so much money has been expended at this point. I mean, so much research, so many studies, so much has been put into this.
Well, we know the
Yeah.
people of Mitchell are tired of studies, and that's all you keep doing is studies. So it's time to stop studying and move on. So if you're not going to do it now, it's not going to get any cheaper to do in the future. So it's entirely up to you guys. It's in your hands at this point. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Sabers,
No.
Rice,
Yes.
Dosher,
No.
McCardle,
No.
Barrington,
Yes.
Allen,
No.
Sharks,
Yes.
Smith.
My meaningless vote is yes.
Okay, motion fails. Okay, action to approve Resolution R 2023-44, lots K and M, a subdivision previously platted as Lot S of Maui Farm, Second Edition. Mr. Jenigus.
Mr. Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 5-0 with 2 absent. It's following the master plan out there. They have a PUD for some storage sheds in that area. I think there's 2 or 3 left out there. These are the last 2 or 3 for this area. Can answer any questions that you have.
These are just more sheds down at some of the open.
Yep, towards the north end, yep.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Rice, second by Mr. Smith. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve Resolution R 2023-45, plat of Lot 1, Block 5, Woods, First Edition. Mr. Jenigus?
Mr. Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 5-0 with 2 absent. This is in the Woods Edition, follows master plans for a dwelling to be built out there.
Move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Allen, second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address it? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve Resolution R 2023-46, plat of Lot 11, Block 9 of Woods, First Edition. Mr. Jenigus?
Mr. Mayor, Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 5-0 with 2 absent. Again, this is following the master plan in the Woods Division, on the Woods. It's for, I believe, another dwelling unit to be built out there.
Motion by Mr. McCardle. Second by Mr. Rice. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve Resolution R 2023-47, plot of lots 1A and 1B, Block 5 of Woodland Heights, First Edition. Janice?
Mr. Mayor, Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this 5-0 with 2 absent. This one probably looks a little more familiar to you. The plat was approved 11/7/22. They built a duplex on it. the center line on the duplex was not parallel with one of the boundary lines, so normally it's the north half or the north 35 feet of that lot. So they had to resurvey because it's a skewed line, so that's why it's lot 1A and lot 1B for that.
Motion by Mr. Rice. Second by Mr. Barrington. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve resolution R 2023-48, plat of lot 1A of Brig Addition. Mr. Janigas?
Mr. Mayor, Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this, 5-0 with 2 absent. There were 2 lots for this. They're combining them into one for future development. Along with this, there were some ingress and egress easements that went to Lot 2, which was in the northeast corner. That's gone now, so they can build further onto there. They've got an easement for where they're talking of the telecommunication tower. And also with this, on the back side of it, the city is retaining a 20-foot easement on the east side for utilities as well. I can answer any questions you have for this one as well.
Motion by Mr. Smith.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Okay. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address this? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Action to approve resolution R 2023-49, vacation of public rights of way, a portion of Indian Head Drive. Mr. Janigas?
Mr. Mayor and Council, Planning Commission recommended approval of this, 5-0 with 2 absent. Kelly Gross, Barton, Nikki Frederickson, Chuck and Priscilla Stevenson, CJM Consulting, Inc., are requesting the governing body of the city of Mitchell to vacate the right-of-way described as set forth below pursuant to the statutes in such case made and provided, particularly SDCL 945-7. Separating petitioners respectfully show and representing the following: that the portion of Indian Head Drive, which is adjacent to the Gross property, Frederickson property, Stevenson property, and CJM property, but only such portion lying east of the west property boundary of the CJM property, and not including any portion of the intersection of Indian Head Drive and South Harmon Drive. So requesting the red shaded area, excuse me, not shaded, but the red area there. It's an unimproved right-of-way right now. Requesting to vacate that for the future development for up at South Lake. Utility access will be through there, possible drainage in that area as well. With this petition, there's also an easement set forth in the petition for the city of Mitchell to retain that easement area. No permanent structures could be built on this location from any of the property owners. One of the reasons was if that road were to get built in the future, the assessed value would be about $100,000 for one of the owners. That was his reasoning for wanting to have that vacated. Public Works does support this vacation. Planning Commission also supported it, and they also brought up the fact that most of the vacations they do not support at all. This one they thought was a good idea.
Move approval of resolution R 2023-49.
Okay. Motion by Mrs. Chark, second by Mr. McArdle. Further discussion? Anybody in the audience wish to address it? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Motion, excuse me, move into executive session in accordance with South Dakota Codified Law 145-23 legal. Motion by Mr. Rice, second by Mr. McArdle. Discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. My office, please.